or concept of boundary is very interesting. So boundary has a very wide meaning, and some boundary can be visible or invisible, very huge. So wherever fat groups or some kind of distinction appears, the boundary is will be born. So I think it's interesting, and not only in architecture world, but all for everybody, I think. And for the character between Japanese and also other cultures, difference of the boundaries, I think, for example, that is just my personal perception, but I think Western boundary seems like very clear, like yes or no or something like that. But the Japanese boundary is a very ambiguous, very, and then there are many architects said many layers of the boundaries. So many subtle layers. So for example, like a relationship between the human and the nature, I think the Western people seems like standing against natures, but the Japanese people try to harmony, accommodate with natures, and very close, standing close, and very subtle layers, subtle boundaries in between human and natures, and also as for the many architects may said, boundary between outside and inside spaces. So Japanese spaces, as maybe you may already know, the many layers from outside and inside. The line of the eaves, top of the eaves, and also the difference between the floor finish, and also many screens, show screens and glazing, and so that also subtle steps or subtle change of the levels also seems like for us boundaries. So I think not only such kind of example, but all kind of relationship between human beings are also something like that. So that's my perception difference of the boundary. For example, the old townhouses in Kyoto or other areas or old houses. So at certain point, until the certain part, people from a certain relationship can come in, and only the deep, the very inside part, only the family members, and also the very highest position of the house, sometimes traditional house, the only the house holders and the what can I say, the husband, and also the only the first man in the family can approach that spaces, or also some entries only for the special guest. So that's very many layers and many types of the boundaries existing. That's an interesting point. And but one thing we have to be careful is, of course, many cases, current Japanese situation, we are now losing that kind of boundaries. So that's maybe the architect Kuma-san and the other architect try to re-establish the kind of tradition of the many layers. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, the first I'd like to talk about in architecture or art in related with art. So for example, one style or one period of the era, that when the meeting or encounter of different styles or different beyond the border is a kind of good chance to create a new generations or new styles. So, but actually, I learned from Professor Hisao Koyama, you may know, and so he is interested. His work, he taught us how the architecture form transformed. So we are, as an architect and artist, and also even not only architect, but all the person is interested in not the relationship between the two styles or changes of the styles is true or not. But our interest is how the change occurred in the meeting encounter of the styles. So in such kind of viewpoint, I think architecture in United States, there are many kind of architectural styles happened and changed in the 200 or 300 or 400 years. So that's a kind of experimental field of changing styles. And so in the changing of the style or meeting encounter of another different styles, so sometimes the change of the forms also occurs, and also the change of the kind of composition has changed, will be changed. So I think the relationship between that to examine that or to analyze the changing system is maybe that kind of give us a clue to how to generate the new form or something like that. So maybe that's a kind of border or encounter of different systems, I think. So maybe as for the just imitating to other styles or other cultures, I think, for example, Frank Lloyd Wright take as Kevin Sensei researched many configuration of Japanese paintings and Japanese ideas, but still in architecture we have a lot of things to reconcile with the nature and also the site. So I'm interested in not only the fact he brought from Japan or not, but how he adapted Japanese forms to the real architecture. So that's I'm interested in. So maybe it's hard to bring just the surface, but whenever we have to build or design something, we have to think about how to ground and how to reconcile the situations. So that's I think, interesting point, and also that's a kind of my answer to your question. So. Japan has a very unique history and also good example of the taking, getting some Chinese culture and then try to maybe need some time and to digest to become a Japanese style. So I think that's of course interesting. But in Japan, it's a very not so many other cultures came, so it's very simple and easy to be understood. But yeah, that's a yeah. Anyway, as you already explained, I crossed the boundary of national and also boundary of cultures again and again, so back and forth. So maybe I think then finally I settled down back in Japan, and so maybe is it okay to show the images? Yeah, I can share with the images slides. So yeah, let me talk about my personal history of crossing boundaries. So, for example, I was born in Tokyo and raised in Tokyo. But if I stayed in Tokyo for if I didn't have a chance to go to United States, maybe I would stay in Tokyo for my lifetime. But anyway, but Tokyo is very exciting city and very crowded, but very full of the stimulus. So as you know, and anyway, I studied in architecture in Tokyo, and I raised in Tokyo and studied architecture, and then I moved to Philadelphia after getting a scholarship to study. But first, I was very surprised. The country of United States, for me, it is a new country, but still in our life around my neighborhood, there are a lot of 100 years old buildings and traditions, and people taking care of the traditional buildings, and they are proud of being a historic site or something like that. So, and also strong communities. And I was very excited. And at the first time, I was so excited to be in the culture of United States, and I was thinking to stay there forever. but having a Fulbright scholarship, after I studied architecture program and then did a practical training, I have to go back to my own countries and then send back to Japan. And first, I got a very severe reverse culture shock, and it's strange. I was Japanese, but I feel like a very looks very dark countries, and very people are looking very quiet, and also standing very closely each other, not only human but the houses, and also way of the thinking the people expect us to the same manner as other people's things. So that's a reverse culture shock. But then taking 1 year or 2 years after living in Japan second time, and I understand the kind of harmonious way of communication of Japanese people, and also in architecture field, the good traditional techniques of craftsmanship. And then finally, I understand how less I, I know much about Japanese tradition and Japanese culture. So since then, I start learning about Japanese tradition. So it's very strange. After studying Western style architecture, and then I came back to Japan. And first, I understand how important to understand Japanese culture. And then I moved not to Tokyo, but the rural area in Japan to for my interest is traditional Japanese carpentry and also second plaster techniques to make use of that, and also wants to have some workshop with students to do in the rural area. So yeah, it's something like or T.S. Eliot said, we shall not cease from exploration, and at the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. So that happened to me exactly through my experience. And also that's one story about many boundaries, and beyond the boundaries give me understanding of our own traditional culture. And also living in the rural area, I think I am still now learning from the many things from the local people, and living in the rural area, I cannot only be an architect. So rural areas, many farmers are doing a lot of things. Farmers are building repair the house by themselves, and also try to keep the water running, and also they are doing a lot of things they are called hyakusho. Japanese farmer is called hyakusho. Hyakusho is having 100 skills and 100 expertise. So, so I think even for me living in the rural area, of course I'm doing architectural work and renovation work as well. But not only that, I start doing a survey of the plants, and also try to cultivate and try to make a soybean and azuki beans and many vegetables now. So I think it's also kind of beyond the border of the professions. So that's I'm now learning. So that's and for example, and also for example, this shows for example, focusing on the one plant. So some ecologists are interested in the fact of the species or something like that. And some girls who is always greedy, she's interested in, is this edible or not? And also my wife artist is interested in the color or shape of the flower. And the local farmer is interested in the timing of the flower. So that's a timing of planting rice or not. So something like that. So even in the one plant, having a different viewpoint give many ideas of that. So that's also a kind of crossing boundary related. So we are now doing work or not every other month or every month we try to get together with many generation and also many people from not only this area but other areas, and also there are many type of the people of many occupations. People are getting together to see the nature and exchange their viewpoints. So that's we are doing, and also try to have having a food or eating activities also good to exchange the everyone's idea. So that's also one good way to exchange crossing the boundary each other. So that's these are, for example, we are doing a kind of our understanding of traditional ceremony of to appreciate of the to express our thanks to the god of the rice field. So we are having many kind of people getting together. So that's so I'm doing. So many people are saying, are you architect or what are you doing? I'm doing a lot of things. So this is also try to do, yeah, traditional stuff. And also we are doing, it's important to teach local children to be proud of their areas. So our areas, of course, many young people goes to the big cities. So we are thinking to try to teach the local children how our area is also the good part of our areas, our cultures. So to the local people, local children, with the help of the local people. So that's what we are doing. And also now my wife is going to start to make a Japanese sweets to make use of our products. We are making the soybean and azuki bean, and also enjoy the nature around us. So that's not maybe related with the question, but so that's anyway. So personally, I have maybe crossing boundary or barriers. Boundary gives me the life challenges. So that's my my answer. So there are many things that, yeah. Yes, and anyway, the thinking about the current situation, I especially in the age we have to live with coronavirus. So, but having that situation, for example, like this conversation, and we are, it becomes very easier to connect each other through internet. But still, I think one important thing is, of course, make use of these convenient tools to make a connection very stronger and wider. And at the same time, I think that tells or that taught us how to more important to notice and understanding our own culture as well, and also others, someone's others cultures as well. So that's I think it's very important. And as I showed before, I through my experience, I think, for example, to understand the other cultures or when they're crossing the boundaries, I think, for example, I'm always thinking three important things. So one is a kind of understanding and appreciation of other situations and other cultures. And then second one is need some time. So not the rapid change or rapid adaptation is not so good, I think. So maybe take time to digest it and also think, yeah, to have a good understanding. And then also third one is, as I said, connection between the people and making friends and connection of the personal and make use of connections. Like, yeah, I and Kevin's son met 30 years ago, but still keep in touch. And also, yeah, I know Bandit Sensei who came last year, and but it's a kind of just one meeting, but has a lot of chance in the future. So I think that kind of personal relationship is very important to understand. Also, to when the crossing boundaries, I think it's very helpful.